You might have noticed something strange. Almost everyone seems to have a chronic illness all of a sudden. People in their 20s, in their 30s. What's going on? The percentage of people with a chronic illness is now around 40%. That's insane. And you might have heard explanations like toxins, food, radiation, etc. But if that were true, then how come we can switch all of these symptoms on and off by doing the release work? That doesn't make any sense, right? To be honest, I don't think that the question should be what's in our food, but instead, what have we lost? Culturally, spiritually, historically. In this video, I'm going to walk you through all of the systems that kept our humanity sort of like functioning for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and what we have dismantled in a matter of 3 generations. Let's dive into this. And let's start with the extreme basics of our lives. Everyone has been a child. Everyone was raised. Everyone went to school. So let's look at that first. A child needs emotional regulation. That means that a little child can't handle the overwhelming emotions in the first few years of its life. When this has not been taught or provided to the child will then learn to suppress these emotions in their body because it deemed it as too overwhelming, too difficult. Therefore, one of the most important aspects of parenting is to teach a child how to regulate its own emotions, how to deal with shame, anger, loneliness, fear, etc. There were some ideas in the previous century. For example, let babies cry until they're exhausted. Don't pick them up too much. Don't spoil them with affection. Children must be independent as early as possible. Emotions are weakness. Toughen them up. Achievement matters more than connection. Kids are resilient. They'll figure it out. Parents don't need to apologize. Because I said so is enough. Feelings are inconvenient, dramatic, or even manipulative. And then at school, which was something that has been there for the last few hundred years, children need to sit down. Now that seems very reasonable, the last one. But if you need to sit down, you need to suppress yourself, your actions, your desire, your true self. And that comes as well with emotions. For example, shame. The feeling that you are not good the way that you are. And all of these things bundled together creates emotional suppression. So it is normal in our society for children to get into the freeze response of the autonomic nervous system and to then push through with a coping mechanism, for example, pleasing or acting, or anyway, there are thousands of coping mechanisms. So this is actually very important. This is the basics. But then let's expand. Almost every one of my clients come from the Western world, so the chances are you as well. Did you know that we actually used to have a very different religion? The Celtics, the Celts, and the Germanics. These were tribal cultures in which there was not a patriarchy, but men and women were equal, and emotions played a very important role, and we sort of worshipped nature. So everything was sort of explained, and that created something that is called connection. This is actually very important. And when we shift to Christianity, this nature religion sort of shifted into a theoretical scripture religion that was no longer connected to the here and now. And that is causing disconnection. And almost every one of my clients is actually, well, they realize that eventually that they no longer crave anything that society told them to achieve. But what they mostly crave for is the connection with themselves via the emotions, but also the connections with the tribe and the connections with the land. And when that is lacking, we sort of like get a void inside of ourselves, an emotional pain, and we turn outwards to not feel that pain. And in the past few hundred years, you see that the people in the Western world sort of were occupied with these coping mechanisms in the form of conquering, achieving, etc. And that has brought us as well quite a lot of things as well. I mean, it's not just bad. And when I go back to Christianity, something that has also been lost nowadays with the secularization of society, you can see that a lot of things in Christianity has to do with emotional regulation, whether it comes, for example, to sins, redemption, confession, and all of these things that we used to have, we no longer have. And you can see that people are still needing it and searching for it. But when there is no longer any redemption possible because of maybe the doom of the climate change or the doom of the people who are becoming awake, let's say it like that, then everybody gets in this doom and gloom phase. And there is no regulation possible anymore. And all of this doom and gloom keeps you in a perpetuated emotional state. And that's when the fight or flight kicks in as well. Fight or flight are emotional states to find safety. But that safety is no longer possible because the danger is inside of you. A lot of my clients are still in their 20s and 30s. And they grew up at home as a latchkey child without their parents. So that means that they almost never receive what they emotionally needed, if their parents were able to give it at all. This is sort of like destroying the cornerstone of our civilization. And that might sound very conservative, but I think that the cornerstone, the family, was already a weakened version of the tribal communities that we used to have. And then when the parents come home in the evening, when they're tired, do they have the space to actually care? Do they have the ability to feel these emotions? Because maybe they have learned to suppress their own emotions. And if your child is many hours of the day at school, then who is going to regulate your child at school? The teacher? I don't think so. If a teacher has 30 children and no emotional knowledge themselves, then how do we actually expect this? I completely understand it. Rents are more expensive nowadays. But for both the parents and the child, it creates a continuous survival mode. And in survival mode, people tend to think black or white. Good and bad, evil versus good. It gets a bit too extreme. You see that in politics. And when I look at all these people, I actually see inner children. So what happens is that you store all those emotions in your body. And then these emotions are still a part of you, but they're sort of stuck in time and they never really evolve into an adult. So there's a part of you or me or everyone that still represents a little child. And when these come to the surface, you tend to become emotional, or maybe having a lot of thoughts, maybe the need for black or white thinking and extreme coping mechanisms, but that will just perpetuate the stress that people are having. And now comes a thing that is probably difficult to explain for me, because you can see that you can use this for your advantage. Let's say you're a company, you want to make profit, or let's say you're a government and you want to control people. If you can trigger their inner children, or if you can actually at the first time suppress them when they're still children, then it becomes very easy to control people. So you see that in the media, the movies, almost everything sort of like is a state of hypnosis. And a lot of people are afraid of hypnosis. Sometimes I receive emails, is there hypnosis in the program? I'm so afraid of it. But we're trying to break the hypnosis, if you understand what I mean. When you're always receiving the same informations via different types of sources, it sort of gets implanted in you. And the same thing can count for coping mechanisms, things that you need to achieve for. But as someone that achieved all his coping mechanisms, I can tell you that it doesn't lead to anything. Because as soon as you arrive at the thing that you have been programmed to reach, you feel empty and pain inside of you. And the only thing that can make you go forward is to just move the horizon to a further place. But at one moment, it's no longer possible. That's when you need to stop. And maybe you're spending a lot of time on your phone. The phone is full of algorithms that makes you addicted. YouTube is, Instagram is, all of these things. And that means fight or flight. That means that when you, for example, feel bad and you decide to turn on your phone and just scroll around, and if you put your phone away an hour later, you're going to feel a lot worse. And that's unfortunately the way that these things are programmed or installed. You know, I got my smartphone in 2012. Not this one, but another one. I read a study in 2018 that in those 6 years, the amount of burnouts more than doubled in the Western world. And it was all hinting towards this. Because we human beings need a lot of time to process. If you, for example, have a conversation that lasts around an hour, in the past you would sort of like wind down after that. Or maybe after work you had some time to wind down. That is no longer possible nowadays. People are in a constant flow of needing distraction, which is also fight or flight. 2012 was sort of the year where I felt that my life ended. Before that, I could plan my life. I could make a 5-year plan. In 5 years, I want to achieve this. And after that, that was no longer possible. The Mayans predicted the world to end in 2012. And if you look at fashion, you can see that there's not much change since then, or music, or subcultures. Somehow it seemed that the world really ended in 2012. Because in order to be creative, you need to be relaxed. And if you're no longer relaxed, you can't create. And the thing is that when you sum it all up like this, it seems terrible, right? But I think that it is actually amazing. You see, our grandparents, they could sort of like soothe themselves a little bit. And things were dormant in their bodies. Have you heard of ancestral trauma? I do believe that I sort of like inherited a lot of trauma from my parents, maybe directly or maybe even indirectly. But through the last hundreds of years, we can say that everything was sort of like dormant. There was a world internally and a world externally. And nobody talked about the emotions. Nobody talked about the difficult things. And now all of a sudden that is completely changed. I think that this time is perfect in a way that everything will come to the surface. Everything will come to the light. In my own being, small emotions that might have been inside of my body for like entire life. And if this weren't happening all at once, it probably would have stayed there for the rest of my life. Then my children would inherit it, and that would go on and on and on. Don't get me wrong, it's not easy. And I don't think that you could release everything all at once or in a year or maybe 2 years. So you need to take your time. But when there's nothing to reach. Let's say it like that. Because you've already arrived. That's a big difference. If you realize that you've already arrived, you can take the time to deal with that layer by layer. And if you have a symptom every once in a while, who cares? You can release it. And if you can't, then just join the release program. So we can transform ourselves and we can go into the next timeline. I don't know how the Mayans predicted that, but I think it's going to be beautiful. Probably will take another 2 decades at least. But after that, paradise.